Hello and welcome. This is a special edition of Into Vietnam ahead of the New Year occasion, brought to you by VITV channel. Please stay tuned with a thorough review, sharp analysis and expert opinions on Vietnam's economy in 2013. According to the report by the General Statistics Office, the Vietnam economy in 2013 witnessed remarkable improvements despite missing some targets set from the beginning of the year. Let's take a look at noticeable economic figures of the year.
The year 2013 draws to close with estimated GDP growth rate of 5.42% compared to 2012. This growth rate is lower than the target of 5.5%, but still higher than the rate of 5.25% in 2012, showing the recovering signals, in which the agro, forestry and fisheries sectors were up by 2.67%, industry and construction up by 5.43%, service up by 6.56%. CPI in 2013 is at the lowest level in the past 10 years, rising only 6.04% from 2012. In 2013, the month witnessing the highest CPI growth rate is February, with a rise of 1.37% on month. The month witnessing the lowest CPI growth rate is March, down by 0.19% on month. In terms of trade activities in 2013, the total export turnover was estimated to reach $132.2 billion, up 15.4% on year. Import turnover hit $131.3 billion, running $0.9 billion of trade surplus after witnessing surplus of $780 million in 2012. Noticeably, the trade surplus in 2013 largely depended on the FDI sector. In details, while the domestic sector runs a trade deficit of $13.1 billion, the FDI sector runs the trade surplus of nearly $14 billion. In 2013, the registered FDI was estimated at $21.6 billion, and the dispersed FDI hit $11.5 billion. It's the highest level in the last 4 years. The processing industry attracts most of FDI in 2013, accounting for 76.9% of the total registered capital. Thái Nguyên is the province attracting the largest amount of FDI among 63 cities and provinces all over the country. In terms of partner, South Korea is the biggest investor in Vietnam. The total retail sales and service turnover in 2013 are estimated at 2,618 trillion dong, up 12.6% on year, and at the lowest level in the past 4 years. If the inflation is excluded, the total retail sales and service turnover in 2013 went up 5.6%. Industrial production in 2013 shows signs of recovery, especially in the processing and manufacturing sectors, witnessing some remarkable improvement. In the whole year 2013, IIP was estimated to rise 5.9% on year, higher than that of 2012, in which Q1 rose 5%, Q2 rose 5.5%, Q3 rose 5.4%, and Q4 rose 8%. In the banking system as of December 12, 2013, the total means of payment rose 14.64%, capital mobilization rose 15.61%, credit growth 8.83% compared to the end of 2012, higher than that of 2012 but still lower than the target of 12%. Meanwhile, according to the Ministry of Planning and Investment, the bad debts went up 2.38% per month, down from the rate of 3.91% in 2012 and much lower than the rate of 6.34% per year in the first 10 months of 2012.
2013 is coming to a close. Looking back in the past year, Vietnam has encountered numerous challenges. However, with tremendous efforts of the government and the State Bank of Vietnam, this can be seen as a successful year to some extent in dealing with the problems and implementing the State Bank of Vietnam's policies. International experts express their view towards the issues. More to follow.
And if you look in the last 2 years, especially in the last 12 months, you've seen real big progress in stabilizing the system here. So you're seeing interest rates 2 years ago for 1 month rate was about 14.8%, and now today it's about 4.8%, so it's 10% less than 2 years ago. And this is a much better environment for companies that need to borrow. The cost of borrowing in dong is much less than it used to be. Also, the exchange rate stability has been very important, as well as the inflation reduction. But the real key part is liquidity in the system. There's a lot of liquidity. So you see banks actually being very liquid, which is reflected in the rates, both for local currency and foreign currency. I remember 2 years ago in December, to access dollars was very difficult. But as a result of the state bank efforts, the dollar liquidity now is much better. So which helps our customers be able to trade, be able to manage their business much better than they were able to 2 years ago. But I recognize the stability needs to stay and needs to be maintained for the next few years to give a real solid foundation for growth in the economy.
Well, first of all, I think we need to look at the achievements of monetary policy in 2013. Inflation has come down into single digits. It's remained in single digits for also almost 12 months. The exchange rate has been very stable, and also the level of reserves has gone up. The SPV has also managed the management of the gold market quite effectively. So at the end of it, we have a banking system that is a little bit more stable. Macroeconomic headlines are good. So all in all, a good year in terms of outcomes. In terms of the role of the governor of the State Bank of Vietnam, I think one must recognize that he has a very difficult job to do, and the outcomes show that a lot of effort has gone into achieving macroeconomic stability, and we wish the governor well in 2014 as well, and we wish good outcomes for the State Bank of Vietnam in 2014. The outcomes in 2013 have been good, and there has been an opportunity to reduce the policy rates in the past. But we believe that the economy still might have some underlying inflationary pressures coming from the fiscal side or coming from wages in the economy, which the SPV needs to monitor very, very carefully. Therefore, in terms of the policy rates, it might be a good idea to monitor these inflationary pressures very, very closely before any further action is taken in terms of changing the policy rates. For the time being, it's best to wait and watch to see the inflationary developments.
So I think, as we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months, Vietnam's gone through a very encouraging period of stabilizing the economy. When you look back to 2011, we saw inflation very high, a lot of pressure on the currency as well. And the government, the State Bank of Vietnam, responded, I think, very positively to that, putting a very stabilizing monetary package in place. Interest rates went up, and we saw inflation come down. We saw the pressure come off the currency as well, and I think they did an excellent job in that. And I think it's very important. That's a very important part of investor confidence, because it provides stability. And when investors look at the stable environment, they're able to plan the investments that they want to make. They have a better sense of where the currency is going to be as they make their investments. So, in terms of building investor confidence, currency exchange, macroeconomic stability is absolutely critical, and I think the State Bank understood that. And I think they were very disciplined in putting that package together and maintaining that package in place, because it's obviously putting interest rates up to the level that they had to put interest rates up to is not easy. It's tough for business. And I remember at the time when they put the package in place, there were a lot of questions about, are they really going to be able to sustain such a tough stabilisation package? And they have, and to their full credit. And I think investors recognise that. There's been a lot of discussion about the non-performing loan problem in the banking sector, and it's quite large. I think when we saw credit growing at the rates it was 3 or 4 years ago, 30 to 40% 30 to 40% credit growth, it wasn't a surprise that there was a sudden ramp up in the level of NPLs in the banking sector. So as we've seen over the last 12, 18 months, NPLs have really grown quite significantly in the banking sector. That's a problem for the banking sector because it obviously it erodes capital and it diverts resources away from making new loans that can fund growth in the economy to managing bad loans that you're trying to get your money back. So it was very important for the government to put together a structure that can help the banks address the NPL situation. I think the VAMC is a very positive step in that direction. I think it assures the banking sector that there is a source of liquidity if that's needed, and that there is a mechanism where they can take those NPLs and partially recover them recover them at that stage. I think it's also good discipline that the VAMC is requiring the banks to write down the value of the loans as well during the period that they're holding the bonds.
Vietnam's macroeconomy has been gradually stabilized in 2013. Local production and business activities have been improving to the year-end. Some show the optimism for Vietnam's economic prospects next year. However, challenges remain in developing the economy as its gross domestic growth was low, bad debt resolution is not fulfilled, and business difficulties are there to stay. This issue will maintain in the coming year. More insights in the following report. Socio-Economic Development Plan Resolution for 2014, the National Assembly targeted gross domestic products will expand by 5.8% and price increase of 7%. In 2014, the government maintains its priority of macroeconomic stability and restructuring the whole economy. However, there are some obstacles that the country needs to deal with in the year to come.
Thì trong 2014 thì tôi cho rằng là kinh tế sẽ tiếp tục cái quá trình thoát dần ra khỏi giai đoạn trì trệ. Kinh tế vĩ mô sẽ tiếp tục ổn định và cái khả năng mà phục hồi doanh nghiệp ở trong nước sẽ khá hơn. Mặc dù ví dụ thị trường bất động sản thì vẫn sẽ còn khó khăn, nhưng mà nó sẽ ấm hơn. Tôi tin sẽ ấm hơn. Hay là những cái khó trước mắt, ví dụ vấn đề nợ xấu sẽ giảm dần. Những cái nghẽn sẽ giảm hơn, lãi suất có thể giảm hơn nếu lạm phát kiềm chế ổn định. Thì đó là những cái mà có thể là hỗ trợ cho thị trường, hỗ trợ doanh nghiệp.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact is expected to have profound impacts in Vietnam's economy via the detailed terms in the pact. Advantages of the trade agreement come in parallel with challenges, as businesses will have to encounter big rivals with more capital and financial resources, higher level of technologies, management abilities, and experience in both manufacturing and business activities. Therefore, local firms should follow closely the roadmap of executing an open market. Basing on that, they can develop investment and production plans and enhance their competitiveness in order to be able to compete with foreign rivals.
Một loạt các ngành nghề sẽ được liên thông, cái dòng vốn về tài chính, vốn về tri thức, vốn về lao động nó sẽ liên thông trong khối ASEAN. Trong khi chúng ta biết rằng thời gian vừa qua là cái năng suất của Việt Nam chúng ta còn khá là thấp so với một số nước trong nhóm ASEAN.
Tuy nhiên là để có thể khai thác cái cơ hội đó thì chúng ta lại phải chuẩn bị thật tốt, tức là hoàn thiện mình hơn và chuẩn bị trên nhiều mặt. Ví dụ về năng suất lao động. Và năng suất lao động thì ngoài cái quản lý thì chúng ta phải tính toán đến cái đầu tư về thiết bị. Vì có những cái thiết bị mới và chúng ta khai thác được, sử dụng được tốt đó thì nó sẽ nâng cao cái hiệu quả trong cái năng suất lao động. Và khi năng suất lao động thì ta có thể cạnh tranh về cái giá cả với một số cái nước.
At the same time, the issue of resolving non-performing loans will prolong till next year. The non-performing loan dealing process is now slower than the initial plans. Moreover, a small amount of bad debts were brought by the VAMC. The amount of bad debts officially revealed is said to be lower than the real amounts of bad debts in commercial banks. The debts were traded but yet resolved by the VAMC. Once bad debts are still unresolved, credit growth can hardly be recovered, and there's little chance for Vietnam to realize its GDP growth target.
Cho đến nay thì các cái giải pháp về nợ xấu thực sự căn cơ liên quan đến thị trường nợ xấu sẽ chỉ được thảo luận về mặt ý tưởng trong năm 2014. Vì thế cái việc thực hiện nó nếu mà sớm nhất cũng có thể chỉ thực hiện vào nửa sau năm 2014. Mà nếu mà vấn đề nợ xấu chưa được giải quyết triệt để thì hệ thống tài chính cũng chưa có sự phục hồi và do đó doanh nghiệp cũng chưa được hưởng lợi. Vì thế tôi cho rằng là năm 2014 chưa phải là một năm có những cái sự khởi sắc.
So all in all, despite a number of positive signs, Vietnam's economic recovery is not strong enough. Vietnam's economy is still in a hard stage in the short term and cannot reach high growth in the next couple of years. The government and relevant agencies should cooperate to maintain appropriate economic growth, ensure the achievements of macroeconomic stability, and resolving remaining problems in 2013. In their latest reports on perspectives of Vietnam economic outlook for 2014, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank reached an agreement that the main momentums for growth have been external factors like exports and foreign direct investment. Mr. Samit Dutta, the CEO of the HSBC in Vietnam, says internal elements such as domestic consumption power and production should try to contribute more and bring more stronger and more sustainable development. Let's join him in the business talk.
Hi, Mr. Dutta. Firstly, let VITV say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. And thank you very much for joining our interview today. What the biggest problems faced by Vietnam in 2013 have been high non-performing loans, stagnant realty market, low domestic demand, and slow manufacturing sector. In your viewpoint, to what extent has Vietnamese government succeeded in dealing with the problem?
The issues you mentioned, these are symptoms of an illness. The illness was caused 2 years ago. The illness is not an illness of today. The illness was caused 2 years ago because for the period 2008 to 2011, we saw very high credit growth, and that led to speculation because money was cheap. Companies got a lot of money into the system, and many of them ventured into unrelated areas to their core business. And that caused a problem. So that caused inflation to go up, and that caused money to go into segments which were not very productive. And also, as a kind of side-on impact, the Vietnamese dong was depreciating every year against the US dollar to the tune of between 5 to 10%. These problems have now already been addressed. Between 2008 to 2011, credit was growing at between 30 to 50% every year. From 2012 onwards, the government has actually put in place credit growth restrictions to make sure that credit comes into the system, but it grows at a sustainable pace. That has worked remarkably well. The government has put in place a number of controls regarding inflation, regarding interest cost. So the problems which was excessive credit growth, very high inflation, very high interest rates, which made companies go bust, because there are very few companies which have a robust enough business model to be able to borrow at 25 or 30% and still make a profit. So these problems have been addressed already. Credit growth has been brought down to sustainable levels. Inflation and interest cost have come down, and I think they are very, very reasonable levels today. The country keeps on flourishing, exports keeps on growing, imports are also quite healthy, the country is having a trade surplus, the Vietnamese dong is very stable. So these core issues have already been addressed. The problems what you're talking about, the symptoms we're facing today, these are the hangovers of the illness of yesterday. So it will take some time for all these to be cured. But the basic steps have already been taken in place. And I think the government and the State Bank of Vietnam have done a very effective job in stabilizing the economy. So if you look at international investors today, when they look at Vietnam, they see a country with very stable macroeconomics, credit growing at a steady pace, GDP growing at a reasonable pace, the Vietnamese dong is very stable, inflation is low, interest costs are low, and they say, wow, this is a stable country, maybe we should consider investing.
What are the major restraints to the Vietnam's economic development in 2014 regarding to conventional and unconventional challenges? And what should the government and a business community to do to remove the obstacle?
I think Vietnam is in the stage of recovering from an illness which it contracted 2 years ago. And it's been recovering, but sometimes these illnesses take some time before the patient can be fully healed. So I think from a State Bank of Vietnam perspective, they've already done what they were required to do to stabilize the macroeconomics of the country. Now it is time for the average Vietnamese consumer, for the average Vietnamese company to look at Vietnam and say, you know what, the problems we faced have been addressed. Let's have confidence in the country's economy. For the consumer, let's go out, let's begin spending more, let's begin consuming more. Once people begin consuming more, local companies automatically will need to produce more, because they will have to provide enough supply to meet the demand. And automatically, the economic cycle will come back into a growth pattern. Today, the problem we are seeing is people are scared to spend money. People are cutting down on consumption. That's a function of customer confidence. So, in terms of moving forward, I don't think now there's anything left for the State Bank of Vietnam to do other than to continue keeping the macroeconomic stable. But now the action has to be taken up by the average Vietnamese consumer, by the average Vietnamese company. In the past, 5 years ago when I first came to Vietnam, the confidence from domestic consumers in Vietnam was very high. But internationally, people were nervous because they saw very high inflation, very high interest rates. Today, there's a reversal. Internationally, people are saying, you know what, Vietnam looks like being a good place to invest in. But the domestic consumer is now a little bit negative. So we need people to have more confidence, to go out and believe, you know what, Vietnam is recovering, growth is happening, let's go out and invest.
In their latest report, the World Bank and the ADB both review Vietnam's economy growth in 2013, and in the next few years could come from external factors of trade and foreign direct investment. Is it worrying that internal factors like domestic demand and production have failed to make a significant contribution to the economy?
I think it is correct that the Vietnam economy has continued to grow while domestic consumption is not growing as fast. You're absolutely right. But that's an opportunity. So what companies in Vietnam are doing today, when their production may be exceeding domestic demand, they're exporting out. And because the quality and the cost of production in Vietnam is good and is competitive, they're able to be successful in exporting. So the Vietnamese economy is growing, as you very rightly point out, because people are able to export. We now need domestic consumption to come back to further kickstart the economy, right? So when we have a combination of a strong domestic market with people buying more, people producing more, and a strong export market, then the Vietnamese economy can truly grow at a much faster pace. So yes, I know that domestic consumption this year has been low, but maybe next year is going to rise. And to me, that's the opportunity for Vietnamese companies. Once domestic consumption comes back on track, then we'll see companies flourish even more than they have been doing all this while.
What are your projections of key economic indicators for the country in 2014, including GDP growth, inflation, and credit growth?
So we think next year will be a year of modest recovery. We are predicting that the GDP growth will be around 5.8%. We believe inflation will continue to be reined in by strong and very sound macroeconomic policies. We believe the Vietnamese dong will be stable against the US dollar. There may just be a marginal 1 to 2% depreciation like we've seen in 2013, but overall the Vietnamese dong will be stable. So we actually see the stability continuing and we see growth increasing.
And finally, this year is coming to an end. And what would you say to VITV's audience and ahead of Christmas and the New Year's?
Well, I would like to wish all of VITV's audience a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. I am confident that 2014 will be a year of increased growth for Vietnam. And I look to VITV's consumers to express their confidence in Vietnam by going out, spending more money, consuming more, so that automatically they can kickstart the economic cycle in Vietnam. So I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a very prosperous and successful 2014.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for participating with us today.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully average Vietnamese people will regain their confidence on local market and helps to boost in coming years. We can be optimistic that Vietnam's economy will recover from the bottom next year thanks to multilateral efforts from the government as well as local business community. And that's all for this edition of Into Vietnam. And after all, thank you so much for your company in the past year. Don't miss more business updates on VITV channel. Goodbye and Happy New Year.